Hello folks, welcome to the Ask the Yard podcast where we have got some important information here. So you'll all have heard, or some of you will have heard, about the new working paper that came out just before Christmas. So I just wanted to give you a bit of an update on that. So essentially, just imagine a world where developers can simply write a cheque to bypass environmental regulations. Well, that's exactly what the UK government is proposing with their new planning and infrastructure bill. Today, I'm going to be diving into this controversial plan that claims to solve both the housing crisis and environmental degradation in one fell swoop. So, what is it? Well, the plan centres around a new concept called the Nature Restoration Fund. So, instead of developers having to jump through hoops to mitigate environmental damage before getting planning permission, they would just pay into this fund. The government argues this will streamline the process and speed the planning system up. Essentially, it's a pay-to-play system for developers. Now, while this might accelerate developments, it does raise questions about environmental protections. The government claims the money from this fund will be used for strategic environmental improvements, whatever that is, rather than kind of piecemeal efforts tied to individual sites. They envisage larger scale projects managed by a delivery body, possibly Natural England, but we'll wait and see what comes of that. So one example mentioned is tackling nutrient pollution in waterways. So currently developers in affected areas must prove their projects won't increase nutrient levels. This is a complex and costly process. Under this new proposal, they basically contribute to the fund, which would then finance broader solutions across entire affected areas. So whilst this sounds promising in theory, there's concern about potential abuse. Could developers use this as a way to buy their way out of environmental responsibilities? I mean, I think we live in a very different world now to what we did 20 years ago, but the government does insist the fund will focus on real-world action instead of paperwork and process, but the details of implementation will be critical. And I'd just interject into my script there and just say, look, you know, at the end of the day, we have a lot of people coming to us for protected species surveys, and it can't be right that homeowners are being forced to spend tens of thousands of pounds sometimes on bat surveys when the mitigation at the end of it is, you know, a £20 bat box on the side of their house. It's not proportionate. We want to make sure that species are protected appropriately, but at the same time, it needs to be done in a pragmatic way. Anyway, this approach, for those of you that are a little bit older, is kind of reminiscent of the carbon offset programs of a decade or so ago, which did have mixed success. And like those programs, the effectiveness of this initiative will depend on how it's managed and monitored. A public delivery body is expected to oversee payments and actions required from developers, but robust oversight and transparency will be key to preventing loopholes. Currently, this is just a working paper, and the government is seeking feedback from stakeholders, communities, developers and local authorities with ambitious goals of building 1.5 million homes and advancing 150 major infrastructure projects. They will likely push this forwards quite quickly, I would have thought. So this, coupled with BNG, means, you know, potentially big changes. What is to be decided is exactly how this is going to feed into local development plans, which have quite often taken decades and decades to get across the line because of all the various different community engagement elements in that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. The big question remains, really, doesn't it? Can this proposal truly deliver on both fronts, boosting housing development and protecting the environment? It does have the potential, but success will, I think, hinge on proper implementation. If it's done well, it could result in strategic large-scale environmental improvements and also unlock housing projects. But poor management, however, could reduce it to a loophole for avoiding meaningful protections for our biodiversity. It's notable that this proposal comes from a Labour government. I do try and avoid politics on here, but I have quite strong feelings about this at the moment. And Labour is traditionally seen as more aligned with environmental interests. This shift does signal a new approach aiming to balance growth and maintain environmental credibility. The Deputy PM recently stated that the plan would put an end to the status quo whilst restoring nature, but we will see on that. Local communities will probably feel quite conflicted about this, as I hinted at before. The current system gives them pretty significant input on how development impacts their environment, and a shift towards centralised large-scale planning might make some feel like they're losing control over local matters. There are also legal aspects to consider. Environmental law is complex with national and international obligations that the UK has to meet. If the new system weakens protections, legal challenges will be likely, probably from conservation bodies. I know the Bat Conservation Trust is working on a response to this at the moment. Another potential concern is obviously housing inequality. If not designed carefully, developers could prioritise high-profit projects in sensitive environmental areas rather than addressing actual housing needs. So the system must incentivise appropriate development in the right places. On a broader scale, if the UK can make this work, it could set a precedent for other countries grappling with housing shortages and environmental degradation, but that remains to be seen. The proposal also needs to align with the UK's broader commitments to biodiversity and climate change. The Nature Restoration Fund could help create habitats or enhance carbon sinks, but clear metrics and targets will be essential on that. As this develops, key areas to watch will include the setup and management of the Nature Restoration Fund, transparency and oversight measures and responses from environmental groups and local communities to this working paper. It'll also be important to monitor how this fits into the UK's broader goals, like achieving net zero emissions and reversing biodiversity loss. So, to my listeners, really, what are your thoughts on this proposal? There is a lot going on at the moment, and we will cover this at Rover Live, which is happening in March in London. Some of our regular customers are going to be invited to that. It is invitation only. Keep an eye on my weekly emails because we'll be sending out further information on that this Sunday coming. Is this a smart way to balance development and environmental protection, or do you have concerns? Let me know. Reply on this video is going up on our YouTube channel, so you can pop something in the comments below. And if you have seen similar systems in other countries, your insights would be quite interesting. So I'll just sum that up basically and say thanks for tuning into this quick update on the Ask the R podcast. We have got Sean Toffs joining me later on this week to record a podcast. That will probably be the next one that goes out, and I am aiming for a little bit more consistency this year. Now I have freed myself up a bit more from operations within the business. So until next time, stay informed, stay engaged. Remember, trees first, not last, and I will speak to you at the next one.